Hi everyone, I'm Prashant. This is my first ever YouTube video, hopefully of many to come. If you like the content, please subscribe, like, and share with your friends. Let's get to the video. Today we are going to look at the October 2020 visa bulletin and the impact it has on EB2, EB3 India applicants specifically. This video has been recorded as of December 1st, 2020. So there might be some changes that have happened since the recording and when you see it. I want to start with the disclaimer that I'm not a lawyer. Nothing we are going to talk about in this video is legal advice. And most of it has been secondary research, and I will post the links of the articles that I read also in the description section. There's a lot of speculations ahead, especially in the last section. Please take everything here with a big spoon of salt. Who is this video for? The key target audience is folks who have already filed for adjustment of status as of October or November 2020, specifically EB2 and EB3 from India and China. The key goals of this video is to, number one, educate the audience on US green card process, country caps, spillovers specifically, how do these things work? Also explain what happened in October 2020 and attempt to take a stab and estimate the green card issue velocity for EB2 and 3 India post the October 2020 bulletin and what happened. These are the topics we are going to cover in the video. We're going to start with citizenship laws and implementation. This is a basic primer for folks watching this video who do not have a good grasp of the basics. If you already know this, please skip over. There'll be chapters provided at the bottom of the YouTube, so you can just go to the right one. We're going to talk about spillover scenarios. How does it work within employment-based subcategories and between family and employment-based categories? We're going to look at October 2020 situation, what happened, and what is the impact of it on EB2, 3 India green card velocity. Let's start with citizenship laws and implementation. Key topics we are going to cover here are what are the green card application categories, what are country caps, what do they mean, and what are the definitions of these key dates, which is the final action date and date of filing. Application categories and number of green card allocated per category are mandated by law. To change this, there needs to be an act of Congress. That means the House and Senate has to pass something for any change to happen in what we're going to talk. So there are two big categories of green card applications. One is the employment-based, other one is family-sponsored. I have written down these categories here and given a simplified overview. We're going to focus on the employment-based categories for the purpose of this video. As you can see, the employment-based green cards are in total 140K. We'll go through the details in a little bit. And family-sponsored green cards are 226,000. Employment-based green cards are primarily issued by USCIS for applicants already in the US on a skilled non-immigrant visa like H-1B or L-1, whereas family-sponsored green cards are primarily issued by US Department of State via US embassies abroad. So these are given to people who are not in this country already, typically not in the US already. So that's a basic definition of the two quotas, and there's a limit on per category how many green cards can be given as a max, and these are all defined in the law. Country caps. This is an important topic to understand. So as per the law, there's a 7% cap per year per country per category, and this is only hit by some countries, of course, and there are some exceptions to it, which is the crux of this video. The current backlog countries are India, China, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, Mexico, and Philippines. That means even if there are green card numbers available, it can't be given to these countries if they hit the 7% cap per year. That's why they're backlogged. Let's talk about the key dates before we move on. One is the final action date. If your priority date is on or before the final action date, you're guaranteed a green card if everything goes well. That is, your green card application will be processed right away, your adjustment of status will be processed right away, and you would get a green card. Whereas date of filing means if your priority date is on or before the date of filing, you have the permission to apply for an adjustment of status, but there's no guarantee that it'll be processed or it'll be issued a green card. It's just you're allowed to go in line. Both these dates are announced monthly via visa bulletins by USCIS. It's important to understand why there are these two dates, right? A bit of a quick history is the government mandates the number of green cards that can be issued as a cap per category, per country. It's a complicated math. Going over that number is illegal, whereas going under is okay. So what happened in the past is the US government does not have a good idea of exactly how many people will qualify, or even an approximate idea of how many people will qualify for a green card if the final action date is set to a certain date. So they typically set it very conservatively so as to not break the law. What that meant was there was a lot of green card numbers that were being wasted. To circumvent that, in October 2015 bulletin, they added a date of filing whereby you can go line up and the government has a better idea of what date to set the final action date based on the number of visas they have to give that year. So it gives them more data, better data to avoid wastage of green card numbers year over year. That's why there are two dates, a date of filing and a final action date. Another concept to understand is federal fiscal year. It's different from any fiscal year. It starts in October and ends in September. So the fiscal year 2021 starts October 20th, as you see in the slide, and finishes on September 21st. Now let's look at spillovers and how spillover scenarios work. There are two major scenarios. One is spillover across employment-based and family-based categories. How do numbers spill over between these two categories? The second one is spillover within EB categories. In the spillover in the EB categories only, there are two subcategories. One is within EB, how do green card numbers spill over within the capped countries, say India or China? And the second one, which is the most interesting part for this video, is how do green card numbers spill over from uncapped rest of the world to capped countries? Why is spillover important? Cap rules do not apply to spillover numbers. So this is over and above the 7% allocated per country as a cap per year. So that is why this becomes very important. Let's look at the first category, which is spillover across employment-based and family categories. At the end of the fiscal year, say from fiscal year N, when it becomes fiscal year N+1, that is September, and then it becomes October, whatever green card numbers are left over in employment-based categories get added to the next year's number for family, and vice versa. Whatever is left over in family gets added to employment-based category quota for next year, along with whatever is available for that year. The next one is spillover within EB categories. That is the first scenario we look at, which is how does it spill over for, say, India or China between these categories if there is green card numbers left over in one of these categories at the end of the year. So from EB4 and 5, whatever is left over goes to EB1, and then it comes down from EB1 to EB2, and then EB2 to EB3. Now let's look at the second scenario, which is spillover from general uncapped rest of the world bucket, that is a non-retrogress countries. If they had any green cards left over in these categories, how does it come to the capped countries, right? It's the same logic as the left-hand side, but there are some additional stops. Before we move on, I want to introduce the concept of most retrogress country. For every category, the most retrogress country is a country which has the earliest final action date for that category. If there are any green card numbers left in EB4, EB5 in rest of the world, it moves first, spills over to EB4, EB5 of the most retrogress country. If there is still anything left over, now it will go to EB1 of rest of the world. And then from EB1, it goes to EB1 of the most retrogress country, and if there's still something left over, it'll flow to EB2 and so on, right? EB2 of uncapped rest of the world to EB2 of most retrogress country, EB3 of uncapped rest of the world to EB3 of the most retrogress country. Although this is a little bit complicated, look at this very important considering what we are going to see later. Interestingly, as of November 2020, India is the most retrogressed country for all EB categories. Another thing to note is that the spillover happens only in the last few months of the fiscal year, when there is more certainty about unused green card numbers from the rest of the world. Let's double click on scenario 2 for a little bit. Most retrogress country is essentially a shorthand, right? Even that is not in the law per se. It's more of a shorthand used for explanation. Let's take an example. Say EB2 of uncapped rest of the world has an excess of say 1,000 green cards the last month of FY 2021. That would be September 2021. Now EB2 is capped only for India and China at this point in time, let's imagine. Now step 1 is 7% of the excess is allocated to each of the backlog countries. India gets 70 green cards, 7% of 1,000, and China gets 70 green cards, 7% of 1,000. If there are 3 countries, they will all get it. Step 2 is when the rest of it, that is 84% in this case, is allocated just based on priority date. So irrespective of country of application. So essentially they just throw away the country of application allocated to anybody based on the priority date, just plainly based on priority date. Practically, it will benefit the country that is the most backlog almost entirely. In this case, it will be India. However, it can potentially impact other backlog countries as well, depending on the actual spillover number and number of applicants in the backlog for that country. Now that we are done with the basic fundamentals, let's jump into October 2020 situation. What happened? What opened the floodgates? Circumstances that led to this are primarily COVID-19. The F category green cards that are primarily issued by US embassies abroad couldn't be issued due to COVID-19 since March. Most embassies are closed for business. So for 7 out of 12 months, that's greater than half of fiscal year 1920, F category green cards haven't been issued. It's been in pause. The outcome of that is that 121,500 F category green card numbers from FY 1920 spilled over into EB category. Remember, at the end of the year, it goes across. So all of those numbers moved to EB category for FY 2021 starting in October. This represents roughly 50% of last year's F category green card numbers. That's a huge overflow, especially considering F category visa numbers. Overall, the pot is way bigger than the EB category pot. So from a bigger pot, you get half of it flowing into EB. That's what led to this situation in October. What does this mean for EB2 and EB3? All EB categories for backlog countries get double the number of green card guaranteed because of the F category spillover. And especially for EB2 and EB3, you can see that from 2,800, this goes to 5,200, nearly double. India EB2 and EB3 could also benefit minimally from spillover this fiscal year from EB4 and 5. Remember, they also got double. They're already current and they got double, as you can see. So you can expect some spillover from EB4, 5 to EB1. And from EB1 to EB2, 3 is suspect, but it's still a possibility because EB1 is still backlogged. So it could take up all the numbers, but there's still a chance that some of the EB4, 5 numbers could go to EB1 and then trickle down to EB2 and 3. It's a possibility. The third repercussion of the situation is that India is the most retrogress country in all EB categories, technically except EB1 where it's tied with China. But what this means is all rest of the world category unused numbers that will spill over will likely come to India 100%, which is a huge windfall that will lead to a lot of clearing of backlog. So even if there is no spillover from EB5 rest of the world or EB1 rest of the world, which I marked in red, there will still be direct spillover from EB2 rest of the world to EB2 India, which is marked as 5, and EB3 rest of the world to EB3 India, which is marked with 7. So no matter what, EB2 and EB3 are going to get green card numbers from rest of the world. What are the variables that could affect the benefits for India EB2 and EB3? USCIS processing speed. Remember, the unused employment-based category green cards will go to F category by October 2021 if they're not given out. So that means USCIS needs agents to process the adjustment of status applications, conduct in-person interviews, and most importantly, this crunch will come in Q4, that is July, August, and September of 2021, when the EB rest of the world numbers are likely to roll over. The odds of this happening is 50-50. This is just my opinion here. It depends on the political will. If there is a political will to issue all of the green cards that are available, then USCIS can staff up based on the fees it is getting from all of our applications. So it's possible it's in the realm of possibility, but the odds of this happening is 50-50, I would say. It depends on the politics of the situation. But the rest three, the chance of this happening is very low, but I still want to mention it to make sure we are all aware. So there could be a large surge in EB2, EB3, and EB5 applications from rest of the world countries, given almost all of them likely will be current this fiscal year. Excluding India and China, it's likely that everybody will be current. The EB2 and 3 chances are pretty low because applicants should already be employed in the US or should get a new job, likely on H1B or L1. It's hard given the situation with COVID and economic uncertainty, but it's possible. EB5, again, low chance because the minimum investment amount for getting an EB5 green card was doubled in June 2020. So chances of this large surge happening and offsetting the inflow from rest of the world to India is pretty low. The second one, also the possibility is low, is an act of Congress, again has to pass through House and Senate, that could reallocate the spilled over family visa numbers that came from last year back to either family of some other category like nurses and doctors who are needed for the COVID pandemic or any other special situation. Again, with the Senate filibuster in place, with such a polarized atmosphere, it's highly unlikely in my opinion. The last variable is the Fairness of High Skill Immigrant Act, that is S386 or HR 1044. There has been movement in this in the first week of December where a modified bill passed through Senate and gone back to the House. It could become law, thereby scrapping the country code at all, so this whole video is moot. I would be really happy if that happens, but the chance of that happening is very low in my opinion because both Republican and Democratic presidents are not likely to sign it for various reasons. This is just purely speculation on my part, but I think the chance of that going through, becoming law, is slim. Let's double click and look at the crystal ball. Let's look at India EB2 and EB3 velocity estimates. We're going to do some math. Maybe grab a pen and paper. Context first. Why combining EB2 and EB3 for this exercise makes sense? Since a significant majority can upgrade or downgrade between these two, this approach makes sense, especially if you have been more than 5 years on EB3, you can move up to EB2, and anybody in EB2 can move down to EB3. And the author, me, I am in this category, that's why I did the research. So they typically set it very conservatively. I keep getting asked this question of, can you tell me, will I get my green card or not? Can you give a cutoff date? Can you estimate a cutoff date? You can, but to be honest, any estimate with a reasonable margin of error is just nearly impossible. The reason is there is no base data to extrapolate from. The latest data numbers of green cards issued by category, by country is just not available. The government stopped sharing I-485 inventory numbers since July 2018. So you don't have any base data to go off of other than self-reported numbers through forums and other places. And there are too many external variables like applications from other countries, how many people are sitting in the backlog, how fast does USCIS process, too many variables to estimate and say, hey, I think this will be the cutoff date. people who are here, priority date is here and below, will get their green cards by end of this year. Like, it's just super hard to predict with a reasonable margin of error, in my opinion. But what can be done, and that's what I'm attempting to do in the rest of the video, is make some assumptions and calculate the percentage increase in GC numbers. That is, by what percentage will the number of green cards available for India EB2 and EB3 increase, the magnitude of that increase. Using this, if you already have time to green card estimates in your head, you can update it. Or most likely you can say, I'm likely to get it this much X times faster, right? That's all we can say. Without knowing the actual numbers, you can just estimate a multiplier, but that's about it, in my opinion. For example, if the number of green cards available for EB2 and EB3 India doubles in FY 2021, the time to green card would roughly halve, right? So you can make those kind of assumptions, but you still can't say exactly where the cut line is. Some of the key assumptions we are going to make going forward is there is no huge surge in AOS applications from any country out of the ordinary pattern, again, which is very highly unlikely, as we saw in the slides before. And I'm also assuming for now that USCIS can and will process all the adjustment of status it needs to within FY 2021 timeline, especially in Q4 of FY 2021, when EB rest of the world numbers would likely roll over to India. Let's look at the calculations. For EB2 and EB3 India combined, the baseline before any of this happened in a normal year is 5,600. From this baseline of 5,600 in a normal year, what is the new estimate of FY 2021 because of this F category spillover that happened? It's a sum of three numbers, A, B, and C. A is the new EB2 and EB3 baseline due to the F category rollover. Remember, it got doubled, right? So that's A. It's very deterministic, easy to calculate. And there is B, which is rollover within India from EB45 to EB1 to 2 and 3. What does that look like? That'll be the additional number rolling over within India. And the C would be what is the number that's rolling over from the rest of the world to India. So if we add A, B, and C, we'll get the new estimate. Let's start with A. Again, it's straightforward. It's 10,470 is the estimate for A. Like you see in the table at the bottom, it's 2 times 1 for EB2, 1 for EB3. There are two categories. Each category has a 28.6% cap within that. So it's twice 28.6 of 7% of 261,500, which is the new total number of visas that came over from family as well. So the new estimate for A is 10,470. Estimate for B, in my opinion, is 0. Again, I'm trying to be very conservative here in estimating what will spill over from EB45 to EB1 and then come down to EB2 and EB3 India. Let's see the reasons why, right? As you can see in the bottom of the screen, EB4 and EB5, as of September 2020, before this October bulletin, were already current. And assuming EB4 and EB5 use their usual cap, which is around 700 green cards, they have 1,300. So they will roughly spill over 1,200 back to EB1. EB1 already got 2,400 more due to the F category spillover. So as you can see in the bottom table here, the EB1 cap is 5,200 and it gets additional 1,200. That means roughly EB1 will get around 6,400 green cards, which is 2.3 times the usual green card numbers cap from previous years, which is 2,800. So they're getting 2.5 times as much nearly. But EB1 already has a 2.5 year backlog and would likely get more applications in 20 and 21 as well. Hence, EB1 is less likely to get current and spill over anything to EB2 and EB3 within India, just in the India bucket, right? In the total India bucket of green cards. Rest of the world, we'll get to it later. Let's now estimate the value for C. Let's start with EB4 and EB5 rest of the world. For a minute, let's assume that all EB4, EB5 rest of the world spillover gets completely used by Central America, Mexico, China, and Vietnam. That is, these boxes that have a backlog. That means everything is gone in these 4 boxes, and 0 green card numbers flow from here to EB1 and 2. We are being conservative. Let's assume that. So that box is gone. Now let's see what happens to these 3 boxes in rest of the world, EB1, 2, and 3. Before we move there, just a quick observation is that except for India and China in EB1, 2, and 3, rest all countries that are highlighted, the box that are highlighted here, are all current. There is little to no backlog. Even in EB3, for rest of the countries, the backlog is just over a year. So this is pretty low backlog to begin with. With that background, let's make the following assumptions about what numbers will roll over from rest of the world EB1, EB2, and EB3. Let's start with the assumption that India and China will use their full 7% cap across EB1, EB2, and EB3, which makes a lot of sense since they're already backlogged, as you can see by these 6 cells here. That would mean using up 31,400 green cards. How did we arrive at this number? It's 2 countries, India and China, across 3 categories, that's 6 cells, and each cell is worth 5,235 considering the new cap as of FY 2021 across EB1, EB2, and EB3. So that gives us the number of 31,400. Let's move to rest of the rows here. Central America, Mexico, Philippines, and Vietnam. Remember, Central America comprises of 3 countries. Let's start with EB3 first since it's already backlogged. Because it's already backlogged across these rows here, let's again conservatively assume that these countries will use the full 7% cap for EB3 to get current or get close to current. That would mean they would use up 31,400 green card numbers. How did we arrive at this number? This would be one category, which is EB3, across 6 countries. Each country to use full 7% cap for this year will use 5,235. So this multiplication gives the same value as before, which is 31,400. Let's look at EB1 and 2 and how much would they use up. Because these are already current, we can assume that to stay current, they have been using the full 7% of the normal cap in the previous year, which would be the old number here that I'm highlighting, which is 2803. So if we make that assumption, we would get the value of 33,600, which is 2,800 times 2 categories, EB2 and EB3 across 6 countries. Now, we have covered all these boxes here, but we should also remember that the rest of the world will also use some of these numbers. So if rest of the world uses all its usual numbers, like in a normal year, to stay current, going very conservatively, it should roughly use 40% of all these numbers. How did we arrive at 40%? There are 8 countries, including India and China, that are using, in a normal year, using 7% of their cap numbers. That means 56% gives roughly 40% to the rest of the world. And we are assuming that all 40% is being used to stay current. If you go with that assumption, then rest of the world would use 48,000 of the green cards to stay current. How did we arrive at this number? It's 40% of 120K, which is the old sum of yearly limits. So out of 120K, last year they were roughly using 40% to stay current maximum. So that would come to 48,000 green cards they used last year, and we think they will continue at the pace to stay current. Now, what is left in EB1, 2, and 3 is 80,000 green card numbers. This is 74,789. That is the box here for the yearly limit for FY 2021 times 3 categories minus all the numbers we had before. So if we subtract all those numbers, the net we get for EB1, 2, and 3 that will overflow from rest of the world to backlog country India and China is 80,000 green cards. Now, assuming EB1 India and EB1 China will take 1/3 of those numbers completely and nothing will spill over to EB2 category, being very conservative. That still gives India EB2 and EB3 2/3 of the 80,000, which is 53,000 green cards. Out of this 53,000, 7% will first be allocated to China EB2, then 7% will be allocated to EB3 in the first round. That will take away 14%, giving India EB2 and EB3 86% of this 53,000, which accounts to 45,000. In summary, the estimate we're arriving at for C is 45,000. Let's pull it all together here. The final calculation is 55,000. The baseline was 5,600. That is the number of green cards that would be coming to India EB2, EB3 combined in a normal year. The new estimate for FY 2021 adds A, B, and C. Here is 10,470 plus 0 plus 45,000, which comes to 55,500. In English, what this means is for India EB2 and EB3, roughly 10 times as many applicants as normal can likely get their green cards in FY 2021, estimating very conservatively. This is great news for India EB2 and EB3 applicants who file for green cards in October. If all goes well, the velocity is going to increase 10 times this year. So the bottom line is everything depends on USCIS processing speed, especially in the crunch month, which is the last quarter. If there is political will and they're able to do their jobs well, it's going to be a good year for India EB2 and EB3 categories. Now that you've stuck around for this long, there is a bonus section, Let's look at FY 21-22 now. We are currently in FY 2021 and the pandemic is still continuing. October, November, December, 3 months, that is 25% of the year, the F category green card issuance as US embassies abroad is still paused. So there's a realistic chance that 20 to 25% of F category green card numbers could spill over into EB category in FY 21-22 from FY 20-21. This would translate to roughly 60K more green cards in the overall EB bucket, additional green cards in FY 21-22 compared to baseline. Now, assuming USCIS process at speed in FY 2021, by end of FY 2021, nearly all EB categories across all countries except maybe India and China would be current. This would mean nearly all of the 60K additional green card numbers would accrue to India EB2 and EB3 category, hopefully making them current as well in FY 21-22. The bottom line, although it's very sad and unfortunate situation, is what got us here, that is EB2 and EB3 India, China here, could potentially get us there and get us current. Although I don't want that to happen, but it seems like there's a realistic possibility of that happening because of the pandemic continuing into FY 2021. Here is all the references I used in my research to put together this video. I'll be sharing this list in the description of this video as well. If the content is useful to you, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and also share it with your friends. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.